All right, peeps. All right. We're going live right now. Right now. Just doing the usual posting. You know the story. You know the story. And we're going to make this real quick. We're going to have a lot of ones this week. We're going to do a lot of real quick shows. Basically, because I got the time to do it, and then I'm not going to have the time for the next week. So I'm going to take advantage of some time together here. All right, 1 second here. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. Cool. We're going. We're rolling. All right. So today's wine is a very favorite wine. A lot more popularity these days than it used to, and that is Cahors. Cahors. And this won't be the only Cahors we do. I'm going to also feature a small biodynamic vineyard, and we'll probably do that next time. But I love Cahors wine, and it's kind of funny because Cahors, you can see here, that unlike most French wines, so we have two of them here, right? We have this one, which will be our number two, actually, of the two of them, our older Cahors, and we have this one right here, our newer Cahors. Okay, 2016 versus 2009. All right, so little brief thing about Cahors. And notice that in both of these, they say Malbec de Cahors. Now, why do they say that? Because usually French wine is a, they never give the varietal. That's just not how it rolls. That's not how they roll with it. It's not about the varietal. It's about the appellation. If you don't know the appellation, like if you don't know Burgundy's Pinot Noir, you're just not going to be able to, you're going to be looking for Pinot Noir. Where's my Pinot Noir? You're not going to get it. Now, if they make Pinot Noir elsewhere in France for international export, they'll put Pinot Noir on it. So you see now that Cahors is too obscure of an appellation for most people. It's too obscure. And so what happens is that most producers are putting, if they want international export, they put that it's Malbec, because everyone knows Malbec because of Argentina. This is one of the fun things, which is that Argentina got this grape from France, brought over by immigrants, and really took off in Argentina, defined Argentinian winemaking. And in many ways, the fact that it went to Argentina and did so well there saved, I don't want to say save, but I mean, Cahors in France really blew up as a result of Argentina, because it was kind of becoming more obscure. It was more of a backwater wine. It's called the black wine of Cahors because it's a really tannic wine, like we did Tannat 2 nights ago. It's very, very dark, very, very tannic. But you're starting to see them soften it a bit in France, which is, I have mixed feelings about, just because they're trying to make it resemble more of the Malbec, which isn't as saturated in color. So we're going to try it real quick. So we have the first one, Chateau de Mercury, 2016. Very much the Malbec smell. Super, super inky and olivey. Rich, meaty smell here. Bright acid, you also get that a lot, but tight. A lot of could need more time to open up. The tannins need more time to open up. It's a good wine to decant. All right, the number two one, 2009, this has had a lot more time, and with a very tannic wine, you want more time with the grape you just want more time with it because the tannins soften with age. So let's try the 2009. So less intense on the nose, but similar profile. So texture is much better. The tannins are indeed much softer. And you get some of that, acidity, which is really nice on an older wine. The flavors are less intense, but it's much easier drinking than the first one. So my sort of take is that the 2016 if we had waited until like 2025, 2026, it would be a superior wine to this one now. But given the fact that it just needs more time to really do better, and this is the thing, you gotta know which wine's the age. Malbec is like Bordeaux in that it really needs a decade, if not 15 years, before a good bottle is going to really show itself well. Okay, so let's go through some of these questions. Let's go through some of the questions here. Okay, hey Pat, question for you. How would you DM someone you're interested in regarding and taking up and going to take out, who lives in, oh crap, my Mac's gonna go down. Give me 1 second. I gotta plug in the computer. Seth, as for your question about have I thought about making a list of my favorite wines? You know, I got to do better job with picking individual producers because I just I don't know why I haven't done that. I think it's the nature of my personality. Some people are really detail oriented, and I'm not. So I would have to, but it's a good idea to at least say I don't have the burden of reviewing every wine I have, but just if one really stands out, that I should note it. I think that's probably a good idea, and maybe I'll start doing that going forward. It's a good question, Seth. All right, so back to this question. How would you DM someone you're interested in and wants to take out who lives in the same town but you don't know? Between my work and busy life, it seems crossing paths with the prospects I want are slim. Plus, in my town, it's not a hot zone where people are always going out. I know most guys can't get away with that, but in my case, the pre-framing is very strong. I can honestly say I'm in the top in my area. 90% of the girls I want to take out, I can. I've just never been one to DM people I don't know, so wondering how to go about it. Well, it sounds like, you know, if you see them, you're with them on social media, it's really simple, to be honest. You just comment on one of their stories. That's the main way to do it. I'm presuming this is on Instagram, right? Comment on one of their stories. And if you are indeed a very pre-selected guy, you know, they should be aware of you, or they will become aware of you. They'll look at your own profile. And this is one of the reasons why you having a social media profile is really, really powerful. You can meet girls that it would be much more difficult to meet otherwise. You know, back in the day, small town, your reputation preceded you. So you could meet a girl on the street and they might know who you were. So you kind of already had this pre-selection from just your reputation in the town. Now you might have some of that, but so much, you know, if you're outside of high school or college, is really based on an online profile, because then people can see what you're about. So much of broader public conversation happens online, and that filters down the locality. And I do think we're going to see a little bit more of a balancing out of that in the future, but the power of social media profile is really serious. So yeah, I just comment on one of her photos or comment on one of her stories. I think stories are better. They're more engaging. You should get a response from it. You should get a response. And if you're asking what to, you know, just make a quip about it, like a joke about it. And that should be, or even just a statement. You know, if your pre-selection is pretty strong, that means she's going to look at you and she's going to be already kind of intrigued. So there you go. Camus, what's beneath the surface when your girl says things to get under your skin? Well, it just sounds like a standard shit test. I mean, she's maybe trying to get an emotional reaction out of you because that means that you care, right? It gets more emotional engagement. You know, a lot of people who don't do very well who don't know how to communicate or connect in a healthy way will try to seek out negative attention, and they'll try to create fights because that gets engagement, that gets someone's emotions directed towards them versus being ignored. So it's very common with women who have self-esteem issues. Hey, Pat, you made a few posts about demonic attacks. I have researched this recently, and I'm interested in your point of view. Would appreciate if you could elaborate on attack symptoms, recognition, avoidance, how to cleanse to repel. Cheers, brother. All right, well, this is a heavier one, but I figure it's helpful for you guys to hear about it. So here's basically the situation with demonic attacks, and I'm going to tie it into the dating relationship stuff. When we talk about someone's behavior, and why they do the things they do. If you would like to consider the fact that their truths exist on multiple levels. So a girl does something. Now, why did she do it? Well, maybe on a very proximal level, she did it because she yells at you for not taking out the trash. Your girl does that. This is a stupid example. She yells at you for not taking out the trash, but maybe she does that. So the proximal level is, well, you didn't take out the trash. Okay, now let's say but is that the only reason, right? Why would she care about that? So then you get into, well, within the relationship, she feels like you don't really care about her. Okay. And then you get into deeper things about her own baggage and about your dynamic and about her past and her own personality and psychology. And so you start peeling back layers of actual what is the real reason. If you would like to consider the fact that on a certain level, there are spirits and entities which affect individuals. So, for instance, if you're ever doing things and a thought comes into your mind, maybe it's a disturbing thought, you might ask, well, why does that happen? Does it happen because you have a dysregulated neurotransmitter? Well, maybe it happens because of that. Maybe the impulse, for instance, to look at porn. Oh, is it's you have a dysregulated neurological system. Oh, well, actually, maybe you have sexual shame and trauma. Well, also, that's true. And also, maybe there's some sort of demonic energetic force that's going against you. Now, I know people in the modern era are very hesitant to consider these possibilities. It's very, edgy to consider these possibilities. And I know that in this question, actually, the intent is to address some sort of, how do I put it? It's to address, like, if you have an attack in the middle of the night, and we'll get to that. It's very specific. But I'm setting the foundation here so you understand that your perception of reality is extremely limited. Like, let's look at perception just really quickly for a second here. Are you able to, and by the way, guys, I think this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to tell you ahead of time. I think I am going to save most of the other questions for tomorrow. I'm just going to focus on the demonic attack one because it's a really good one. I want to make sure I cover it in a comprehensive way. I got like 10, 15 minutes tops. Okay. So let's look at this for a second. So perception, let's look at your perception. So your vision embodies a certain frequency, right? You have a certain frequency that you're able to perceive in and that visible light spectrum is what your eye is able to see, and it's a very, very small fragment, right? You have infrared on the other end, you have ultraviolet on the other end, but I mean, how much range of frequency? It's less than 1%. Then you have your ears. Now your ears actually hear a different frequency completely. It's very much on the other end of your vision, but it is all frequency. There's actually no real difference between vision and hearing. There's actually not a difference between the two things. They're both simply engaging with frequency because you are actually, all matter is condensed frequency. Everything is frequency and vibration. Okay. So consider for a second that your senses altogether, all five primary senses, right? But then you go into the sixth, what is the sixth sense? Well, it's an ability to feel maybe something else. And, this is what's interesting is that when people talk about like seeing a demon, well, very often, unless you're in an altered state, and you don't need to have drugs to be in an altered state, your actual visual field, your normal visual field is not going to see them. You have to actually change a lot of your own frequency, but just to stay focused here, your normal human range of perception, normal five senses isn't going to get it.
So when you can detect that there's a presence there, it's not like, oh my God, I see like a little demon right there. It doesn't really work that way. Now, I'm not saying that people don't have visions in these altered states where they can see the physical, they can see the structure of it. But for most people, when they sense it, it's that there are some subtle things that change in the environment. So, what are some subtle things that change in the environment? Well, one of the more common ones, and you've seen this from movies, is that the temperature changes. Okay, that's a very common one that happens. The temperature will change very often if there's some, entity that enters the room. Okay, but not always. But that's a very common one. It usually will drop down. So you're pretty warm, then all of a sudden you're not. Another thing that happens very often, and these are ones that I haven't heard talked about, so you might find them more interesting, is that there's a frequency change. When I say that, I mean what you're hearing changes. So, if there's a sort of background, you have if you really pay attention in a quiet room, oh, I don't hear anything. Actually, you do hear people. You do hear something. There's like a background, light, white noise, maybe. So you hear that. But it'll change a little bit. Like I remember when I was under attack when I was out in the woods for about a week, and this was a spiritual journey. I hadn't eaten for about a week. It was 158 hours by the end, and I had a big spiritual breakthrough. And as it always happens, when you have a big spiritual breakthrough, very often you'll get attacked because it's like a test. It's like, are you really having a spiritual breakthrough, or is it just bullshit? And I'll explain something with this in a moment, how to visualize it. But one of the things that I noticed when it was happening was that the sound changed. You had all these tree frogs and stuff. All these frogs were out ribbiting, and suddenly it was like the background, the frequency changed. The sound changed. Something was disrupting the sound, or the nature was changing things. I don't know which it was. I think it had more to do with how it was bending or impacting the sound. But you'll get that. Suddenly things will sound different. Now here's another thing. In your there's also a thought will come into your mind, and this is a very advanced practice to understand this. But because you might think, oh well, where did that thought come from, and you think it's you. It's not necessarily you, and it takes practice to sort of gauge this with yourself. But sometimes you're going around, you're doing things, and all of a sudden maybe some really filthy thought will just enter into your mind out of nowhere. And you're kind of like, wait a minute, where did that even come from? And that's some entity influence. I know some people are going to scoff at this. They're like, oh, you're just, blaming other things. Well, look, I'm going to remind you that you can't perceive what's around you. We don't have a wide visual, oral ability to see what's there. But this is well documented throughout tribes, throughout every single civilization had the awareness of demons. And by the way, in cross civilizations, they describe them the same, that there's these different subsets, these different entities. They have different names for them. They all do the same stuff. They all present themselves the same way. Okay, so you can say that everybody before you was fucking idiot, or you can be a fucking idiot. Probably you're the fucking idiot. Open up your minds. You don't have to hold it very strongly, but I think it's worth holding lightly. So one of the things that I find most commonly happens is that during a dream. So you're having a dream, and a dream's a certain thing, and then all of a sudden when it becomes a nightmare, kids, oh my God, kids, they're so afraid of the dark. They're so afraid, hey, what's the monster under your bed? Oh, you had a bad dream. Well, actually, kids are so much more connected to that kind of energy that kids actually are able to perceive it better. Okay. It's adults that have the problem, because adults are too removed from that world of imagination. They're too logical. I listen, I trust the science. Where's the study on this? I don't see a study.
Those kind of fucking idiot parents don't actually understand that their children are experiencing something. They're actually experiencing a phenomenon. They're experiencing some sort of demonic attack on them. And by the way, children have a lot of energy, but they don't have strong defense mechanisms, which is one of the reasons they're also targeted. They're more open to it, and so they're more targeted by it. Okay. So when they have a nightmare in the very, very strict, there's psychological aspects to it as well. And remember, this stuff is multi-layered. But if something very disturbing happens in a nightmare all of a sudden, in a dream, and then it gets interrupted and there's something really disturbing happens, that's a demon interrupting your dream sequence. That's what it is. Okay. And if you wake up out of that, you can feel that there's a certain energy in the room if you're aware of this stuff, and you can do things to repel it, which we'll talk about in a second. More common one, and this is where people actually see it, is when you have what's called sleep paralysis. And sleep paralysis is similar to a DMT trip, because actually DMT is being released by your pineal gland. And this is a state in between waking and sleeping, where you can maybe hear yourself trying to talk, but you can't talk. You're shut down. But you see things. You'll see something move around the room. You might actually see some of the outlines. You might see like a jester. You might see some sort of entity, some demon even. This is the most common one that people, this is the most compelling one for people when people experience a demonic attack like this. Now, what do you do? How do you deal with it? Look, I'm not going to try to shove anything down anyone's throat, but Jesus Christ, you say the blood of Christ. If you mark yourself with the blood of Christ, and you can command the demon, you can command it. And so when I made this tweet, which is the impetus for this question about how demonic attacks end up being silly over time, the reason for it is that demons have no power over you when you are grounded with that. And I think saying it 3 times in a row is very, very powerful, because of how there's an amplification when you say something 3 times. But the point of all this stuff is, in the name of Jesus, you're not welcome here. And honestly, in the past, I would say this almost like in a very defiant sense. Like I was, I'm going to fight this demon. But now it's just kind of like, oh, it's like a clown. Like literally these clown demons are back. Like, what are you doing here? Like, get a life. Get a life. They're losers. These demons are losers. They're really not that scary. It's to the point where I've like been haunted in a situation, and I'm like, okay, I know you're here, and I just kind of like, I'll like wave my hands, like, just get out of the way. Like they're not really that scary. They're not, if you're used to them, because as you experience them more, you realize that they can't do anything to you unless you're afraid of them. And you can rebuke them very easily in the name of Christ. And I know some people get triggered by that. Well, guess what? You're wrong. You just don't understand. You just don't understand. Just tell you that. You don't understand. So you can disregard the entire thing, and that's fine. They're probably not going to go after you. And I'll tell you, this is the last thing I'll talk about before I get out of here. They will go after people who are moving up in spiritual consciousness. The way to look at a demon, a lot of people have demonic entities around them. They just have no idea, because they're not visible. The way that these things work is they live in the shadows. They will hide behind things. And frankly, because the people who run this world are Satan worshippers, they've done a really good job of trying to make you think it's stupid to even look for them.
So they'll hide in all sorts of personality disorders, and they'll say, "Oh, we got to really go into this psychologically." And look, I'm all about psychology. I do plenty. Like, I understand it. I apply it. Like I said, multiple levels of understanding, but they try to break it down to a fact that there's no other external influence, and it's just not necessarily a effective modality to ignore that. A lot of people have a lot of their problems are because there's tons and tons of negative entities attached to them, demons around them. And if you start to do spiritual work or warfare on them, you can see that they get really angry all of a sudden. They get really agitated. Okay? I'm not going to say it's an exorcism because an exorcism is a much higher scale of it, but spiritual entity purging, yeah, a lot of people, if you start to do work on people spiritually, it'll start to trigger the demons because they get really uncomfortable when you bring all that sort of light, Christ consciousness energy to the situation. When you call them out, when you rebuke them, when you reveal them, they get very, very angry. They get very agitated. And the way I look at it is that if you're vibrating at a certain frequency, it's like a merry-go-round. This is it's like a merry-go-round. I like this analogy. Is that if your merry-go-round is going slowly, if you're vibrating at a lower level, okay, if you're vibrating at a lower level, then you might be moving slowly. You don't realize it because there's all sorts of little entities hanging on. Now, as you start to vibrate faster, these entities start to like hang off the edge. They can't actually stay on your energetic field when you're at a certain frequency, when you're moving at oscillating at a certain frequency. And so that's when they start to scream. That's when they start to make a fuss. You might not even notice them on there. Your eyes are closed. You don't even know that you're pushing all these people and they're slowing you down. But as you start to go faster, and this is why whenever someone's like, I'm under demonic attack, I'm like, great, because that's a good indication that if that person's working on themselves, that's an indication that they're about to break to a new level. Because the demons were always there. You're just now seeing them. It's kind of like when you get a fever, that's an indication that your body's getting better. People are like, I don't want to get a fever. Well, that's how you get better. It's the same thing. You get a demonic attack when you're having a breakthrough. I'm very grateful to demons in the sense that they're good barometers of what's going on for myself, and they help you to see where you have weaker points, because if that's they they have a symbiotic relationship, and that's why I'm not afraid of them. They're just little silly entities that have been thrown out, that just exist around looking for things to parasite off of. So that's pretty much it. What kind of demon attack is anxiety? That's more of just like a constant. Anxiety is more of like, I wouldn't say it's an attack. That's more of that they're just there, And look, when someone's abused, when they have trauma, that gives an entrance for a demon to kind of get in. And and parasite. And I'll also say that some are worse than others. Some are simply kind of like a neutral parasite. Some entities are actually not even, I wouldn't even call them evil. They just kind of work out a deal with you, and you kind of help them and they help you. But yeah, there are demons. They are demons. They're around. Treehouse Puppy, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow just because yeah, I'm just going to talk about it tomorrow because I got to run, and we're going to be doing shows through Wednesday. So we're going to have a lot of stuff to cover. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed today. Yes, it is one of the hats I wear with my coaching business. I don't advertise it, but I attack problems from multiple levels, and I have helped some guys who have had some issues with
demonic attack. So that's your speed, something to consider. All right, I'll see you.